Hello, and welcome to Wesley United Methodist Church of Trenton, Missouri. Our church is located at 113 East 9th Street, which is on the corner of 9th and Washington in Trenton, Missouri. You can call our office between the hours of 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday at 660-359-6762, or visit our website at wesleyunitedmethodist.us. Now we invite you to open your heart, mind, and body to the Word of God with Reverend Barry Boulware.
Thank you for your faithful stewardship. You really are great stewards. Have I told you that lately? You really are. We are in the 28th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, and I begin with the 11th verse. Now, this is part of the Easter story, or the appearance stories, that is neglected, overlooked for some reason. While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priest everything that had happened. When the chief priest had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the guards a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say, 'His disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep.' For if this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. And this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. May God truly bless this reading of His holy written word. What is truth? Well, let's just make a list and go down. What is the truth behind the assassination of President Kennedy? What really happened there? Where is Jimmy Hoffa, the former head of the Teamster Union? Who really is buried in the tomb of the unknown soldier? Did aliens really crash near Roswell, New Mexico? Does Bigfoot really exist? And how about the Loch Ness Monster? What really happened at the American Embassy in Benghazi? Was there outside support for the two bombers in Boston? What is the truth about these things? It's difficult for us to know, isn't it? And in some cases, we'll never know. Sometimes the truth is difficult to find, if not impossible to find. We have been focused on the appearance stories of Jesus after his resurrection. After today, there's just one more story for us to examine. Jesus appeared on numerous occasions during the 40 days between Easter and his ascension into heaven. And today's story is actually part 2 of the Easter morning story as recorded in Matthew's Gospel. Here's part 1 of that story. We're looking at part 2, but just to set the stage. The two Marys go to the tomb on Easter morning. There is a giant earthquake. An angel moves the stone, which is blocking the entrance into the tomb. An angel sits on top of that big rock. The guards who were assigned there witnessed everything, and at this point, when the angel moved that rock, the guards fainted. The angel tells the women that Jesus is risen, that they should go back and tell the disciples that he is alive, resurrected, risen, and then all of the disciples and the women should go to meet Jesus at the Sea of Galilee. The women head back. They encounter the risen Christ on their way back, and he gives them the same instructions as the angel. That's where we begin today's text. The guards wake up. The earthquake and the angel and the moving of the stone was more than they could cope with. So they go back running to the authorities back at the temple. The guards didn't want to be seen as having failed to guard the tomb. And they tell the temple authorities all that they had seen. The chief priest at the temple quickly meet. They need a plan that would explain now the absence of Jesus' body. Never mind truth or untruth. A quick plan of action was what was needed to cover up what was going to be their story. And the plan that they came up with was a simple one. The authorities at the temple told the guards, tell everyone that Jesus' disciples came during the night and stole his body. And part 2, pay these guards a large sum of money so that they would keep quiet about the truth of what really happened. Today, what would we call that? We'd call that hush money, wouldn't we? And that's the story that we just read. The elders and the priests circulated this story. Why would the disciples steal Jesus' body? Well, the Jewish authorities never even tried to explain that kind of question. I guess they just felt people would be inclined to believe their story, that in the middle of the night, the disciples came and stole Jesus' body. The guards knew better. The elders knew better. The temple priest knew better. They knew the truth of what happened. All of them knew the truth. But for them, the truth wasn't what was important. Today's story, even if we but vaguely remember it, doesn't seem to get the attention that most of the other resurrection stories do. Actually, in today's story, we don't even have Jesus' appearance, do we? But it does shine the light of truth upon human motivation. To respond to the question, what makes truth true? Let's first say this. Some things are true. Some things represent the truth. And some things contain an ultimate truth. And here are the distinguishing features between these 3 things. Some things are true, like the laws of gravity, or the addition or subtraction or multiplication or division of numbers. Actually, these things end up what we usually call them as being facts. They're true. We know that they're true. But then I also said some things represent the truth. Here is where we get into kind of a gray area. We all have opinions and interpretations of things. And at any given moment, something might appear to be true or untrue to us. Given the information that we have, given the facts that we have, or let's say the evidence that we have, we form an opinion. That opinion can end up in the long run as being true, and we were right all along. But it can also sometimes end up being wrong. Like in a courtroom, there is sufficient evidence for the jury to reach a verdict. In such a case, the jury's verdict represents the truth or guilt of innocence. Another example would be a doctor's diagnosis of an illness. After weighing all the results of various tests, the doctor tries to identify the problem and hopefully find a plan of action. To say that some things represent the truth doesn't necessarily make it true. Juries can make mistakes. Doctors can make mistakes. Heavens, our car mechanics can make mistakes. Sometimes what we think represents the truth ends up being true. Sometimes what we think represents the truth, we discover down the road it's not true. Sometimes we discover that what we thought was true turns out not to be correct. And then the third category that we identified, Some things contain what I call the ultimate truth. Here, what is called truth is truth. Nothing but the truth, yesterday, tomorrow, forever. Ultimate truth doesn't become a lesser truth. It's not possible for that to happen because it's grounded neither in human evidence nor in human reasoning. It is grounded in the consciousness of the divine. For us as Christians, ultimate truth is grounded in Jesus Christ. What he taught, what he did, what he promised, what his Father did for him after his sacrifice upon the cross. Those things are what represent ultimate truth. Not all things have God's ultimate truth in them. For example, let's say that Frank likes oysters. So he says to Bob, "Try these oysters, Bob. You'll love them." So Bob tries the oysters, and he doesn't like them at all. What can we say about this story? Well, we can say Frank likes oysters. That's true. We can say that Frank thought Bob would like oysters. That's his interpretation. That's his opinion, isn't it? And we can also say that is true, that Frank thought Bob would like the oysters. But Frank's thinking that Bob would like the oysters turns out to not represent the truth. Frank thought Bob would like them, but Frank was wrong. There is no ultimate truth in this little story. Jesus never talked about Bob's taste for oysters. There's no ultimate truth. Now let's apply all of this to this morning's text. What can we say about this story? Two Marys came to the tomb on Easter morning. There was an earthquake. An angel moved the big stone, and then the angel sat on top of that stone and spoke with the women. We can say that the angel said that Jesus was risen, that he was resurrected, and that he would meet with the women and the disciples on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. So far, these things are true, aren't they? They represent the truth through the angel's interpretation. Well, all of these, however, contain not just truth, not just a representation of the truth. All of these things contain the ultimate truth. Why do I say that? Because Jesus had foretold exactly what was going to happen on Easter morning. He spoke those very words to his believers, and in particular to his disciples. He said that on the third day he would rise again, that his Father would do that. He said that he would die on the cross for the forgiveness of our sin. He said that the bread would represent his body and that his blood would represent the seal of the covenant, of the slain blood of his very own. So, the guards see the earthquake and the angel and the moving stone. Then they fainted. The guards take their story to the temple authorities, and the temple authorities pay the guards hush money and spread a story about the disciples stealing Jesus' body. What part of the temple authorities' part of the story is true? Not one word. There's no truth in their story. Oh, this is now their interpretation of what happened to Jesus' body, but it's not true. They don't care about truth. They don't even care about untruth as far as that matters. They knew all about Jesus' promise to be resurrected after his death. They had heard that story. And they certainly didn't want Jesus' story to ever come true. That would discredit their own authority and the lethal actions that they had taken against Jesus. The best that they could do is to somehow just explain the absence of Jesus' body. Here is my encouragement for all of us. Make friends with what is true. Stop denying the fact that there's gravity. Stop denying the fact that what we eat has an impact on how we look, how we feel, and our size. We can be in argument with all those kinds of things, but we're not going to win that argument. Make friends with what you know are facts and truth. Be willing to change your decisions and your interpretations when you discover that they no longer represent the truth. I was in Springfield when this happened. You know, for the longest time, I really wanted O.J. Simpson to be innocent. Why was that? Because he was a great football player. Well, that's an immature reason to want someone to be innocent. I wanted him to be innocent. So that jury and that prosecutor had to really sell that before I was going to change my mind. But at some point along the way, I was forced to change my mind by the evidence. Even though that trial came up ending in he wasn't guilty. Future trials found him guilty. But I was wrong about my opinions. I was wrong about my interpretation of that. In fact, I remember the very moment when he was declared innocent. I was getting out of my car at the National Cemetery in Springfield, about to conduct a graveside. And I turned off the radio right at that moment when they declared him to be innocent. By that time, I was convinced he was guilty. Sometimes we're just wrong. What we think is right, we think it represents the truth. And sometimes we're right about that. Other times we're not right at all. And then I encourage you to do this. Practice the very ultimate truths that we find in Jesus' words and his actions and in his promises as recorded in the Bible. Stand firm on that kind of foundation, regardless of what some people might say. Because ultimate truths, the truths that have no bearing on whether we agree with them or not, they don't change. They're everlasting. What can we say about the guards and the religious authorities? We can say what was true then and what is still true to this very day. Never trust someone whose position of power requires your denial of the truth. It's that simple in words, but it can be so difficult to put into practice. Today, we have our spin doctors. They're on television. They will take a political position on some subject, spin it to their own liking, and hope that you will disregard your interpretation of the truth. You see this happen every day. It's called the suspension of disbelief. We have more spin doctors in America today than we have elected officials. Why is that necessary? They're in newspapers, magazines, radio, television, and their subject isn't always politics. Sometimes their focus is on American culture or the so-called new normal or on trends that are taking place in our country, or even on the subject of justice. Spin doctors are financially dependent upon your willingness to see the truth their way. It's their next paycheck that they're interested in, not necessarily truth. The priests at the temple weren't interested in truth, or untruth for that matter. They spun the guard's story so that they could continue being paid as temple priests. That's why they came up with this story. They didn't come up with it to try to explain the absence of Jesus' body. They came up with that interpretation, the absence of Jesus' body, and the disciples stole it in the middle of the night so that they could still have some kind of credibility amongst those who come to the temple, so that they could still get their paycheck as priest. Never trust someone whose position of authority requires your denial of the truth. In the movie The Shooter, several corrupt men have gathered around a table having drinks, and they're celebrating their most recent conspiracy. One of them stands up and says, "Truth is what I say it is." No, it's not. Ultimate truth is what Jesus says it is, and no human being can change it. It is ultimately and forevermore truth. Like, take this bread, for it is my body which is broken for you. Take this cup, which is my blood that is shed for you for the forgiveness of sins. Nothing can change the truth of that. Amen.
Thank you for joining us on our pre-recorded Sunday morning service. If you would like a copy, you can contact the office at 660-359-6762 or email us at wesleyum@sbcglobal.net. Feel free to visit us in person or online at wesleyunitedmethodist.us, where you will always find open hearts, open minds, and open doors. May the blessings of Jesus Christ be upon you in every aspect of your life.